While I'm getting the cameras and gear all set up for this channel, I figure I'd do a video, just an introduction to me, my background, and, well, my aspirations for the channel. The hobby community has given a lot to me, and I want to see if I can give back a little bit of what I've learned. My name is Charlie, and this is No Plan Painting. My journey into the world of miniatures didn't start with any mystical calling or bizarre life event. When I was very young, I had piles of Legos and Matchbox cars, action figures, just like any other kid. I looked at every room in the house like a new adventure for my toys. I mean, I was a little kid after all. Backyard was an alien jungle, the basement was a haunted crypt, the garage was a space station docking bay. Everything had possibilities, but most kids at that age were like this. But it was when I went to the Museum of Natural History in Cleveland, Ohio, that I found my love for miniatures really began to explode. Seeing the detailed dioramas, intricate models on display really caught my attention. They all looked like little worlds unto themselves. Each vignette was a slice of life, and I wanted to capture that and kind of create my own. Like a lot of kids in the 1980s, I was in the model cars and planes. My parents got me a handful of fighter jet models and sports cars. We couldn't afford all the fancy paints and tools I wanted, but I always had a tube of Testor's model cement and a small pile of enamel paints, and that'd be my first dip into the hobby. Watching movies like Blade Runner, Aliens, and of course Star Wars when I was a kid, I wanted to know how they created the models for the films. After a bit of research at the library,
Don't you know the Dewey Decimal System?
some obscure sources and word of mouth, I found out that they created almost all of it using miniature model kits off the shelf bought at the store and some basic crafting supplies. I mean, the Death Star is made from a lot of World War II battleship models. I kept learning what I could pre-internet era, reading magazines, catching specials on TV about movie effects, but I could only go so far. Then in 1990, one of my younger brothers got a gift that would change everything. One Christmas, he got the board game
Hero Quest.
The setup with tiles and doors, treasures and scenery, and of course, the miniatures it got me. In this box would be the very first fantasy miniature I would ever put paint to. Using a cheap hobby brush and a few Testor's enamel paints, I began to paint the Chaos Warrior. Nothing was primed, no mold lines were trimmed, no prep work of any kind was done. It was just straight enthusiastic paint from pot to sculpt, and it looked like complete hot garbage when I was done. But I didn't care, because those few basic colors added to the mini, it brought some life to it. The Chaos Warrior wasn't just dark gray plastic anymore. He had silver and iron in his weapon. The greens and browns in his cloth felt dirty and worn. And blood red. Everywhere. I mean, he was a Chaos Warrior after all, and I was 14 years old, so blood for the blood god. So shortly after, I would learn what Games Workshop was, what tabletop wargaming was, and eventually I'd make it to a real game store locally and see professionally painted miniatures on display. And oh my god, the display Warhammer minis in my local game shop were absolutely unreal to me. Bright bold colors on gigantic armies, it's all I needed to see. The late 80s and early 90s Warhammer was kind of the final straw. I had to get into this. Then I had what is known in some professional circles to be known as sticker shock. Actually, it was more of a crippling financial stroke. I could never afford the models at my age. At 16, even having a job after school and no bills, this just wasn't happening. So the hobby for me was shelved for a long time. I would occasionally look at gaming magazines and eventually at the Games Workshop website to stare at the miniatures for sale. I figured that once I was old and retired, I would finally be able to afford this. I was still fascinated with the detail of the models and the talent of the artists that painted them. I wasn't really interested in the game itself yet, just the artwork and the lore. Around 2005, I tried getting into painting 40K. I bought one small box of Space Marines and some paint. I still hadn't learned about cleaning the minis, or even priming. I just tried to straight up put paint on them. I never heard of thinning either. I was immediately discouraged. I was impatient and overeager to see the result come from my hand that I had once seen in stores and pictures. So my painting hobby was shelved once again. And in 2007, my son and I got heavy into Heroescape. We bought it for his birthday when we got our first house. So it was a miniature game, but I didn't need to paint anything. And the game turned into a complete obsession. With this game, we reconnected with old friends and made new ones, and we had awesome gaming nights almost every weekend. And then I started customizing figures and scenery. We have so much of it that I had tons of extra things to work with. It's almost embarrassing to see how much Heroescape we have, the whole collection many times over. I was having a blast making custom things in the scenery. I finally got interested in trying my hand at painting Warhammer again. So I bought the Space Marines Scout Squad with sniper rifles. I knew I couldn't use my enamel paints anymore. I had been using those to paint up Dungeons and Dragons and Heroescape miniatures. So after a bunch of research on acrylic paint brands, I settled on Vallejo. Price and availability sold me on them. Even though Games Workshop and others were available to me, that just seemed like the biggest range, and I thought I would be better off with that. I set up a small paint station in the back living room. I had made my expectations a bit more realistic this time. I learned about actually cleaning the minis and priming. Thinning paint was even a thing now. I still have that first Marine I painted. I won't ever get rid of him or paint over him. It's my starting line, and I always want to see it. That was all in 2013. I still had lots to learn though. I eventually found other hobbyists online. Through YouTube and Twitch, I found guys like Kenny Boucher and Jason Craze, and what I consider my mentors, Ben Comets. I would study their videos and tutorials over the following years, eventually going to Adepticon in Chicago and entering in Crystal Brush. The first year I was knocked down a few pegs. I guess a reality check was needed. But later I would finally make the cut. I didn't place, but it felt good to be at least up there with everyone else. So now my basement today is wall-to-wall hobby. What started as a little table upstairs with a few paints has now turned into my passion. Met a lot of great people in this hobby. It's a healthy escape from reality, and I've learned a lot so far. So I want to make future videos and what I've learned, so I might help others just getting into the hobby. I love seeing all the other videos that people upload, because no two are alike. While the basics of painting and modeling might be the same, how everyone got here is different, and most of us seem to have a little unique spin on the basics. So that's a quick version of how I arrived here. This hobby means a lot to me and has helped me tackle a lot of things in my life, which we'll get into in another video. So I look forward to sharing what I have learned in my future videos. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.